Good morning, friends. And welcome to this new morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are and however you are. It's lovely as always to see you greeting each other as you come in. I'm enjoying watching the birds feeding from a bird feeder just in front of me here outside the window. On this new spring day. And as usual, as you settle in to your own personal space here, and feel into the shared field of our shared practice space. And so we share our messages, but then we can also drop in and actually feel each other from all around the world. Feeling the field once again of this really profound and beautiful aspiration to become increasingly present in our bodies, increasingly open in our minds, increasingly soft in our hearts, to wake up to live in love. And so in support of that aspiration, we've been exploring this week the ways love feels and the ways love moves, love's flavors and flows, in order to familiarize ourselves with this inherent mystery that's always already here, whatever the conditions, in all its different flavors and flow. So we've been exploring and remembering the way love expresses luminous warmth, which radiates from the heart. We've been exploring the way this luminous warmth very naturally flows towards pain. When pain arises in any form, physical, emotional, psychological, self, other, world. Pain in any form, in any of those 6 forms, is actually felt here in this body. And so love flows towards wherever it arises here in this body. And to rest beside it, to soften around it, to breathe into it with so much tenderness. We've also been exploring the ways in which we tend to, mostly unconsciously, get in the way of these flavors and flow. The way we contract and collapse around love's natural luminous warmth. The way we contract and collapse around love's natural, tender, patient, spacious presence. And we do so innocently, as a form of self-protection, to try to be who we're meant to be, to attempt to numb or distract or fix the pain rather than rest with it. So all ways that we've adopted, habits we've learned, and conditions that we've received and absorbed from those around us throughout our lives. And so another way that love moves and feels is in response to beauty, aliveness, pleasure, and intimacy. Love flows with a very spontaneous, almost irrepressible, and yet it can be repressed, a spontaneous delight. It fizzes up, it bubbles, it wants to move or sing or participate in the aliveness it's witnessing. It wants to dance with waves, run with trees, sparkle with each other. So it's got this fizzing energy that moves through the body. If you're a visual person, I invite you to really start to lean into what are their colours that are associated with these different flavours of love for you. Are there ways that it looks or feels? And because it brings so much joy, well, as does each movement of love, compassion brings joy in a different quality. But because we long for delight, it would be understandable to imagine that it's not that we get in the way of love's delight. And we might think, in fact, that it's more that love's delight or that delightful moments don't get in our way enough. But actually, that's not true. We really, again, unconsciously contract around and collapse around this movement of delight, the way love moves in response to beauty, in response to pleasure, in response to aliveness, in response to intimacy. We live in a culture that actually shames the way delight moves. I mean, just think of the way that, let's say at least traditionally, it's easier to see because things are getting better, but we still carry much of the remnants of this. But think about traditionally how children were told, and are still told, to sit still, to be quiet, to not be so silly, to strive, to try harder and be better. And just feel how those repeated messages continually strangle the inherent bubbling freeness of delight, the aliveness of delight. When we've experienced this repeatedly, and again in the past children were beaten if they didn't conform, there are layers of trauma that develop which freeze the spontaneity and naturalness of delight's expression, and which in turn attempts to dampen the expressions of delight that it witnesses in other people. It's one of the ways that a traumatized response acts in us, that having done this to ourselves to make ourselves lovable, acceptable, belong, we're also uncomfortable when we see it in others. And so these are how these patterns perpetuate. And so the more we deny this spark of delight within us, the less we're able to celebrate it in others. So this really is a place to become deeply curious about. Where do we strangle or deny or suppress our own access to life's inherent beauty, which is available always? It's like here, especially in spring, we see it so clearly all around us, the irrepressible aliveness of life. Where do we deny ourselves access to life's inherent pleasure? In this tradition, we can become afraid of pleasure because we've seen so clearly how we can become entangled with craving. But that's very different to opening to receive the delight of life's intrinsic pleasure. So the simple pleasures of the experience of a morning shower on our skin, the simple pleasure of this first sip of morning tea, simple pleasure of true intimacy, of connection with each other. These are all everyday expressions of beauty, everyday expressions of pleasure. And our own aliveness, our own creative expressions, our own beings. And to really start to listen to how this being shows up, how this being wants to participate in love's delight. To give space to that again, to give permission. So we've been exploring each morning the ways in which we hold our body influences our access to love's flavors and flow. And more so, because this is not a movement practice, but more so we've been exploring just a little at the beginning of our meditation practice, the ways our breathing can liberate our access to these different expressions of love. We focused a little more in the first 2 days on supporting a slow and long exhalation. Learning through these different exercises and practices the way the abdomen, as it gently engages, can support a more controlled and then slower, longer exhalation. I'll just say a little bit before we begin this morning about the breathing muscles, because we're going to practice together this morning a fuller inhalation as well, slower, fuller inhalation. The main breathing muscles are the diaphragm muscles, which are a dome-shaped muscle. When they're relaxed, they're a dome-shaped muscles just below the front lowest ribs and all the way across like a hammock below the lungs. And so that's why when we breathe out, the diaphragm goes back into this dome shape. And that's why gently engaging the lower belly muscles support the diaphragm to relax back into its dome shape. And when we breathe in, the diaphragm activates and it flattens and widens. Which is why, in order to allow that to happen, we need to allow the abdominal muscles to relax so that the organs can move out of the way, so the diaphragm can move down. And so when we're just at rest, the diaphragm is the main, or the diaphragm in conjunction with the abdomen are the main soft breathing muscles. When we breathe in, Diaphragm moves down and the belly expands. So there's more space inside the lungs, so the air literally is received into the body. We don't pull it in, we just create the space so the air is received. When we breathe out, the diaphragm relaxes back and the abdominal muscles are just held back again towards the spine. So there's less space and the air is offered back out into the world. But additionally, when we want to or need to take a deeper breath, we engage the chest muscles. So the muscles between the ribs, the back muscles, and the diaphragm widens and the ribs and the chest widens. So I want you to think of the inhalation when we take longer breaths as being horizontal. There's a kind of vertical axis of breathing, which we've been exploring, of the sense of breathing down from the brain, down into the ground, down to the lower belly. And the way that we can imagine the inhalation rising up from the lower belly. But then maybe just try it now for a moment before we begin with our formal meditation practice, a sense of the inhalation being horizontal, widening, the diaphragm widening, the rib muscles widening. If you're lying down, you won't be able to feel that forward and back sense of widening, but you might still feel the side to side widening. If you're seated, see if you can feel it. It takes practice sometimes to feel these muscles. And so we'll explore that together as we come to the beginning of our formal practice. So come and find your posture. Whether lying down or seated, establish a sense of broad base. The base means wherever your body is in contact with the ground. And take a slow, soft exhale out through the mouth if you like. Soften the jaw, the tongue, the lips, the eyes. Squeeze and stretch the skin and muscles of your face. Open your mouth wide. Stick out the tongue if that helps. Yawn. So groundedness and relaxation are both supported by the exhalation. So if you like, you might like to take a few slightly longer exhalations, as if the out-breath began inside your brain and then down the body, traveling down all the way down to the lower belly as you draw the lower belly back slightly, all the way down into the ground. When you breathe in through the nose, if possible, relaxing the belly. And another slow, soft out-breath all the way down, relaxing the brain away from the skull. Releasing the jaw, softening the eyes. Relaxing the shoulders, engaging the lower belly at the end of the out-breath, and then relaxing it consciously as you breathe in. And one more time, slow, soft out-breath. You can also chant an Om if you like. And coming to normal breathing and feeling yourself grounded. Inviting yourself to feel grounded. Inviting yourself to feel relaxed. And then if you would like to explore with me a few slightly deeper inhalations, you can imagine the inhalation starts down in the lower belly with the perineum. As if you sip that up and then start to widen the diaphragm, widen the chest muscles, widen the back ribs, widen the front side ribs. As if the inhalation becomes more horizontal, the space created for it becomes more horizontal. No strain. Whenever there feels like a completeness, a fullness. As you let the breath out, don't drop that wideness. So release that wide space very slowly, so it remains soft and slow and controlled. And then take some normal breaths. And if you found that any of these exercises bring additional tension to your body, just let them go and focus on releasing that tension. And if you found any of these exercises helpful, then feel free to release them feel free to repeat them 1 or 2 more times. Breathing in as if drawing up from the very lower belly and then widening, widening, widening. Inviting this space for the inhalation and placing your attention in the space of the heart, this luminous space, this space of luminous warmth. Paying attention now to this luminous warmth. To me, it feels like sunlight that radiates from the heart. And with normal breathing now, when you're ready, resting your attention in the space of the heart and this luminous warmth. And I invite you to answer this repeated question that I'll offer. Answer it from the heart, very simply. And as the answer comes to you, whatever the answer is in that moment, feel the resonance. And I'll be repeating this question a few times. And the question is simply, what is something you love? And as the answer comes to you, stay with that and feel the resonance in your body. And then as if you're receiving this question completely fresh, what is something you love? And again, as if this question were completely fresh, what is something you love? Breathing into the way love's delight feels in the body. asking it to reveal itself to you. Releasing the arguments of the mind that might crowd in with reasons not to feel this way right now. Returning to the felt sense in the body of love's delight. Honoring this guest while it's here. Recognizing how love's delight easily rests alongside love's tenderness, alongside luminous warmth. That we can feel great pain and then also notice the birdsong. That we don't have to deny one in order to attend to the other in any direction. But when great pain is here, of course, that's where love flows with great tenderness. And yet there'll be moments where life's aliveness reminds us that beauty supports us through these times. That pleasure enlivens us through these times. That aliveness gives us courage, hope, capacity. To include the whole of life. When we give it permission, love is ready to delight, even in the things that the mind condemns through its stories and habits. When we really hear the sound of rain, its music, beyond the story of our disappointment or rejection, beyond the stories of what we like and dislike. What is something you love here in this moment, right now? And rather than following the mind into how I can possess it, how does this feel in the body? Can I breathe with life? Breathing with life's aliveness. Breathing in life's beauty. Celebrating in life's pleasure. And this poem, these few words, were written by Lala, a 14th century mystic from Kashmir in India, who was married at 12 and abused by her stepmother and husband, and who left her family in her early 20s to become a holy woman. She wrote, "Dance, Lala, with nothing on but air. Sing, Lala, wearing the sky. Look at this glowing day. What clothes could be so beautiful or more sacred?" Thank you for your practice, your presence. Time for questions. If you have any, you can write question in capital letters in the chat. I hope you were able to hear some of the bird song. And as usual, just an expression of gratitude for your dana, for your support, for both me and Sang Alive. Such a beautiful way of sharing together in this way. And this mutual flow of appreciation and generosity and love. A question from Nita. How do you allow joy of life if you're afraid of losing this pleasant feeling because of impermanence? It's our practice, isn't it? So the beautiful thing is that love is continually flexible and flowing, and it moves to meet our ever-changing human experience. And so in one moment there'll be the joy of life, and there'll be this moment of delight, and then there'll be the fear contracting around it. I'm afraid to lose this. And so the practice is always the same. It's the invitation to recognize when we get caught in contraction, when we get caught in story. Suffering is a good teacher. It feels painful. So when we recognize there's suffering, when we recognize there's reactivity, when we recognize there's a narrative that we've got caught in, there's some way that we've contracted or collapsed around this moment, we become curious. We come into the body, we release the story, we breathe, we feel what's here in the body. And there's fear. And so love's tenderness flows into that contracted place in the diaphragm or the belly or the chest or the throat. And meets that fear now with So much tenderness, turning towards that place of contraction, resting beside it, breathing into it, softening around it. While holding that fear simultaneously, that delight that life had perhaps already offered you is available again at the same time. But now love is able to meet the fear and life's joy simultaneously. And then there's an increasing recognition as well that, as I hope you felt a little this morning, life's joy isn't as limited as we come to believe. It's really abundant. It's also not conditional on something or someone else, as we explored a little bit yesterday, the way we try and run from our pain by projecting outside of ourselves to try and find safety or love or belonging or something there outside of ourselves. So the more we allow love's tenderness to take care of all of these places that we've been running from or numbing or hiding, the more life's intrinsic aliveness and beauty and pleasure become available to us in this very free way, this very simple way. I hope that helps, Nita. Yeah. Question from Claire. If the question, what do you love, brings up sadness and longing, how to feel the joy? There's a similar response to my response to Nita that, of course, that question won't work in that intended way of eliciting the joy for all of us all the time. And sometimes what do we love will remind us of a beloved we've lost, or something that's no longer here. And so instead, that question we ask ourselves will bring forward the pain of loss, the grief. The longing can be felt when it's here in the body, and the invitation is the same. Release the story of lack and loss, release the story of diminishment, but fully turn towards and feel the pain of grief, the ache of longing. Let love's tenderness embrace that. And so that question might not work for you, but it can be the willingness to pay attention to the small things in life alongside that grief or longing, to really just notice the blossom on the street as you walk past the tree in full bloom, to notice that particular smell of sweetness, that particular taste. I hope that's helpful. Question from Ayala. My daughter has an important face-to-face meeting at the uni today. How to deal with fear, anxiety of not being enough? The good news is that the answers are always pretty much the same. So whatever is arising in our experience, in the simplest way, the invitation is to unhook from the story. Well, first, the invitation is to create space, just to pause first, to create some space from the reactivity, from whatever I might be compulsively doing that I've always done before when this particular situation comes up, to make space from the compulsive narratives, to make space, to pause, to come into the body, to bring our attention into the body, to align the body, as we've been doing before we practice each morning, to breathe. Open the jaw, release the tension in the face. Yawn, stretch, to liberate the breathing, to liberate the body. Then to unhook from the stories. Even if they're true, even if they are extremely important, just in this moment, unhook from the stories. To anchor our attention here as we practice with the breathing body. To reach for support. To call in our supports, whether that's our family, whether that's our friends, whether that's our guides and mentors. To reach for the support in the unseen realms if we have access to that sense of a less tangible support, the spirit realms, to reach for support in nature. So we make space, we come into the body, we breathe, we unhook from the stories, we reach out for support, and with all of that we have more capacity to simply feel the fear, to feel it here in the body, to breathe into it, to turn towards it, to rest beside it, to soften around it, to witness love's tender response. I hope that's helpful, Ayala. So there's a question, I'm not sure your name, I'm afraid, TGBIZ said. My doctor tells me my high blood pressure is induced by my anxiety, that I have a lot of energy that I need to channel and that I need to channel it. It's been more than a year. I meditate, do yoga, drink herbal teas, the list goes on with what I do to feel calm and no change. How to be more kind and patient with myself. It's obviously it's hard for me to support you best without, seeing you and being with you, to find the particular dynamics that might be at play here. But there are a few things I could say. One is that anxiety is also a orientation of attention. It is possible, in other words, to do all the right things fueled from and by anxiety. We can meditate and do yoga and drink herbal teas in order to try and get my blood pressure down. And so there's this background tension of fear and anxiety that permeates even through these practices. None of these practices are like magic in themselves. They're simply tools. And so how we utilize those tools is everything. I mean, we can see this in the meditation community, in the yoga community. These tools can be equally distorted towards self-aggrandizement as they can to self-liberation. And so just something to pay attention to, the energy behind even your orientation in these practices. And I would invite you to really start to attend, allow love's tenderness to attend to anxiety itself, to become curious about, in the same way, if you've just done all the steps that I've invited Adele to do, in the same way, once we've come into the body, once we've really unhooked from the story, because anxiety is such a strong narrative and story, to start to feel how anxiety feels in the body, feel how the body breathes with anxiety. Lengthen the exhalations, lengthen and lengthen and lengthen the exhalations. Breathing out allows us to breathe in. Soft, slow breathing, slow down the breathing. And become familiar with the way anxiety feels in the body so that we continue to release the narratives of anxiety. Unhooking from the story and coming to the body is one of the greatest supports. I think one of my meditations in December was around embracing anxiety. And then, patience is hand in hand with that in some way, because when we start to meet this moment just as it is in the body, without any agenda around it, because agenda is a story of the mind, we meet it not so that it will go away, which is what actually we very often do. We're willing to feel this pain so that it goes away, which has a quality of sort of pressure and striving behind it. And so it fuels that fear that I can't actually be with this embodied anxiety here and now. So once again, our time is up now. I hope the answers to your questions have been helpful. There were a few questions yesterday that I wasn't able to respond to. Lois very kindly emailed me the questions I hadn't responded to, so I'm happy to answer them in the Sang Live Connect space at the end of the week. And if there are any other questions, I think I might have caught them all today, but if there are any other questions today or on other days, I can add those to the unanswered questions. And as always, you're welcome to email me if there's something you want to ask me individually. So much love for the rest of your day, for that invitation to keep opening to the beauty that's already here, the aliveness that's already here, and the pleasure that's already here. And just this question, if it works for you, maybe more in this moment. What do I love? Just in this moment, what do I love? See you tomorrow. And thank you once again for your dana. I'll just post the link in the chat. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.